elated, excited to be here with you all this morning. And as I look at the screen, I heard you say there, Brother Reed, a moment ago, that you are having or looking to have an in-person breakfast come up soon. And I wish that was the case this morning. I wish all of us were sitting at the table and we just set our forks down and we had some good eggs, bacon, pancakes, those type things. That is considered a good breakfast. But because I want this to really be conversational. I don't necessarily want it to be something where I'm just going through a series of slides and information that I do want to share with you, but I want this to be a dialogue between us, because this is something that pertains to all of us and has pertained to us in many stages in life and will pertain to us in all stages in life, and that is our finances. As Pastor Reed stated, I've had the privilege and the honor of serving he and his wife, working with the two of them, in which I'm grateful to have made the acquaintance and have the relationship with them. I'm a financial advisor. I've been providing financial advisory services now, I'm dating myself, for over 25 years. And currently the agency that I clear with is Prudential as an agency. And he mentioned also one of the associate ministers at my church, which is Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church in Westland, Michigan. And my pastor is Reverend Dr. John E. Duckworth. And what has really birthed this part of ministry for me in terms of helping provide what I call kingdom stewardship principles is that I have had the honor of serving as the head of our trustees ministry for over 18 years. And a few years back, there were some members in our congregation that had some questions, and came up initially in a Bible study. And Pastor Duckworth asked me to put together some information that brought together not only from a biblical perspective of what the Bible tells us to how we can be better stewards with our finances, but I also then brought in the experience that I had over the years of working with many different clients. And here we are today. Still, God is blessing me with the opportunity to share this information, and have been blessed today to come out and share with you all. So I'm so glad to be out with you this morning and to be back amongst the Sons of Thunder Ministries. So again, please, gentlemen, at any point in time, unmute yourself, ask a question, try to keep or type one in the chat. But it's a few, enough of us here where, hey, you can raise your hand. Hey, Brother Joe, just chime in at any point in time if you'd like to share some information and or if you have a question at the same time.
Brother, what is your church again, please?
Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church in Westland.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So one of the things that is, I think, very important, we are all men. We are all sons of God. We are all brothers in Christ. And as men, we have been also charged with being the foundation of our households, being the head of our households. Our children look to us for knowledge, information, and wisdom. And we also look to provide that to other members, even outside of our direct household. So why am I sharing that? Is that I think it's important that we understand the importance that we have in our individual lives, in our households, and in our local communities. So what I put here on the screen before you is just a graph. This goes back to 2016. This is actually showing what is called the median net worth compared with other ethnicities, primarily our Caucasian brothers and sisters. But what the screen is showing you is that for whites, the median net worth is roughly almost $180,000 to $188,000 net worth. So let's make sure we understand net worth. That is your assets minus your liabilities. It's not cash flow. That's what you own compared to what you owe. And for blacks, the median net worth is $24,000. Yes, based upon our country's history, based upon things that economically were against us for years, we have been at a disadvantage. But the important thing is that now that we understand what net worth is, I think it's important for us to change that, especially the economic landscape and the things that we're dealing with today are different than what it was 100 years ago. So what I want us to understand, when Proverbs 13:22 tells us that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, so many of us always limit that to solely thinking of life insurance or passing on a paid off home, or I'll have some money in the bank. Those things are good. But what we need to understand is that part of that inheritance we need to pass along is knowledge and wisdom. And so knowledge and wisdom is going to come from our understanding as well. So one of the things that's beautiful about knowledge and wisdom, as long as your eyes are open and your ears are working and your heart is beating, you can always get it, no matter what stage in life that we find ourselves in. So what we want to look at today is just a few tips, a few things to help further your knowledge, to help further your wisdom. So that is something that you can pass on so that we can change the way this graph looks going forward in the future. I would hate to look up 20 years from now and we still find the same level of disparity. And we want to change that by changing it in our homes first, changing it with what we do, and changing it to how we can create what I call generational or legacy wealth for our families. So let's jump right in and start off with organizing your financial paperwork. I believe one of the most important things that we need to understand, being a good steward of what God blesses us with, is to be organized. And I know a lot of us, I know me particularly, I love springtime, summertime as it comes around. And one of the things that I enjoy is getting my yard cleaned up, getting the leaves out the way, getting the bushes trimmed, and seeing my grass come up nice and green and getting it edged up. Am I the only one who really likes a nice looking yard, doing the spring cleanup? Well, that's important, but what is even also just as important, because it's still cold and wet outside, is that we begin to get some of our paperwork and our finances organized. And so what I want to just share with you are some important papers that you need to keep organized and in a safe place. So, we are in a virtual space right now. So a lot of times, when I'm meeting with people in person, I'll have examples of these documents and we'll pull them up, but we're meeting in a virtual space. So here we are, it's March, coming up in April. Many of us may have already had our taxes prepared, or many of us are in the process of gathering those documents. As a rule of thumb, I've had people ask me for many years, how many years of tax returns should I keep? You should keep at least 7 years. 7 years, up to 7 years of tax returns you should keep on hand. And I would probably say up to the last year worth of paycheck stubs or canceled stubs in terms of what you've gotten paid from your employer, your 1099 documents. You can keep that up to the last year. Now, again, we're in a virtual space nowadays, so many of these documents are sent to us electronically, which helps keep things a little bit more organized. But if you're doing any major home improvements, putting on a new roof, putting in a new furnace, putting in new windows, anything that's a major home improvement, always keep documentation of that, especially going forward if you ever look to sell the home. So that way you can show and provide the new homeowner with when those things were done. Now, what are some of the things that you can throw away? I don't know about you, but many times nowadays you go places, they'll ask you, do you want a paper receipt? So if I'm using my debit card, most times I'll say, no thanks. I don't need a paper receipt because I have a transaction of that when I can go online and look at my bank account. But any of your basic receipts that you have, from shopping at the grocery store to restaurants, even, for example, your utility payments, I wouldn't go beyond a year of keeping utility records from DTE or Consumers Energy, or even your credit cards for that nature. These are some of the things that you can throw away to help declutter some of your financial documents. And then when it comes to your investment statements, what I would recommend is keep the year-end statement. So your December 31st of the previous year. So any of your investment accounts that you have, your 401k, brokerage accounts, things of that nature, I'd keep the December 31st, 2021 statement. And then any of the previous year's statements, I would only keep, again, the year end. I wouldn't keep the whole year's worth of statements. It's just a lot of paperwork, because your year end statement will typically outline what happened in that account for the entire year. So those, if somebody had a question?
I just said amen, bro.
Sorry, yes, sir. Yeah. That again, going back to just keeping organized, and that's a part of good stewardship as well. And speaking of being organized, we want to make sure we're organized with who we owe. I heard Pastor Wesley say a moment ago that he heard a word or shared a word with members in the congregation in a meeting to stop creating bills. Well, that's partly where it comes back when we talk about eliminating debt. You may have heard in the news this past week and I'm going to touch on what's going on in the economy, but the government touched on they're going to start to raise interest rates. What that means is they raise rates, that's going to raise rates on credit cards. So you can see, and those credit card rates, even understand if you signed up for a credit card at one point in time, they do have the ability to increase the rate on that card, which means that you can still pay the same $25, $50, whatever amount you're paying monthly. It just means that less of that payment is going to be applied toward principal. So it still hasn't gone into effect just yet, but they outlined the Federal Open Market Committee, which is the management arm, the financial management arm of our federal government, stated they plan on raising rates at least 6 times over the next year. So you can find a steady rate increase. So if you have anything that is adjustable rate, you definitely want to make sure you go back in and figure out either how to eliminate that debt or to talk with the lending institution to see if you can get a fixed rate, because you definitely don't want to have that mess up your cash flow when we talk about budgeting. But speaking of organizing your finances, every one of us is entitled to an annual free credit report by each of the reporting agencies, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Again, a free credit report. You do not have to pay for this. With the free credit report, it will outline everything that's on your report. It will not show a score. Now, if you actually want to see a score, you can then use one of the agencies or companies that are out there. They have different sub companies. Experian, I know, has one of the more popular ones. And again, I'm not promoting these companies. Credit Karma is another example. These are entities that will help provide the score. Now, one of the myths that is out there is some people believe that when you are pulling your own credit report, that it will affect your credit score. No, it does not. That is actually what is called a soft inquiry. When you yourself are looking at your credit score, you are not looking to borrow money. The only time you actually have what's called a hard pull or a pull on your credit report that can reduce your score by a few points is when you're going to an institution seeking to open a line of credit, whether it be an automobile, credit card, a home equity loan, credit union. That's when those types of pulls can slightly reduce your score. But again, you can look at your credit report. You get a free annual credit report. And I recommend starting off the beginning of the year, especially we're here in the first quarter, at least taking a look. That way you can make sure there's not any incorrect or misreported information on there. That's one thing. Second thing is you want to make sure that somebody hasn't tried to open credit in your name. You look on your report and you say, well, I didn't open that. So again, just to make sure. And the other thing is, even though you may not be in a position this year where you're looking to make a major purchase, but if a major purchase is in your future, buying a vacation property, getting a new car, it's good to know now, so that way you have some time to correct it if the score is not in the range that you would like it to be. As you can see here on the screen, ideally speaking, the max score you can get is an 850, but the benefits of a person who is at 850 extends to the same person who has a score of about 725 to 700, meaning that you are in the preferred borrower seat. You would have institutions that would be willing to lend you funds at what would be considered the ideal or best rates. When you start to get below 700, that's when you tend to find some of these institutions may charge you a little bit higher in interest. If you start to get below 650 to 600, you may find they would say, well, we won't lend it to you unless you bring in somebody else with you. They're going to have you have a cosigner. So it's really important to take a look at your credit. And for a lot of us who may be changing careers, a lot of employers nowadays will use your credit report as a way of identifying if you are a hiring candidate. So definitely take the opportunity, take the time to pull and take a look at the annual credit report.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you get like pre-approved notices, how does that affect your credit, or how do they determine to send you a pre-approved? Does that affect? How do they come about doing that, and then does that affect what you're mentioning right now?
Yeah, great question. So all of us get these pre-approved pieces in the mail, and what happens, which is not supposed to happen, a lot of the agencies out here, they share information. So somewhere along the line, your information was shared from one entity to another, and it shows because of the one agency or institution that you may be doing business with that you are a viable candidate. Those are really just solicitations. It doesn't necessarily mean you are actually approved. They're just saying because, hey, you're with this particular group, you're pre-approved, but you got to send in the inquiry to actually identify if you're approved. So those pre-approvals do not have any effect on your credit report unless you actually then follow through and say, well, yeah, I do want to open this card. And then you give them a call and you tell them to go ahead and run the full report, because they'll still walk you through the full process. So that pre-approval doesn't automatically mean you're in, it's just an invitation.
Amen. Let me ask you a question too, Joe.
Yes.
Yeah. On that, you say that you get a free credit report. Do that applies with banks and credit union every year?
The free credit report comes from the agencies, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. So you contact them directly, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. You can actually even Google it. It's called myfreeannualcreditreport.com.
Oh,
and
okay.
You Google that,
All right.
it'll actually take you to one of the three agencies, and then you fill out the questionnaire. Now, in that questionnaire, when you go to report it, they'll ask you a series of security questions to verify you are who you say you are.
Oh, right. Okay. My credit is in that, that's 725 since I retired, and I try to keep a tabs on how good my credit is, because my wife planned to get a car, in the future.
That's good, and that's good. That means you're in the preferred seat of borrowing, which means, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. So if, like as example, the brother just shared that he's looking to buy a car in the future, take a look yourself. Take a look and look what your credit score is, and take a copy of your credit report with you when you're going to go buy a car. So if you go to the dealership, and all of us, if we've bought a car before, we know we go in and they say, here's the advertised rate, but they say, we need to run your credit. But if you say, well, you know what, here's my copy, and make sure when you go, it's one within the last 30 days. Now, they will not finance it based on your credit report, but they can and they should be able to give you a better quote on exactly what your payment is without running your credit report. So that's where a lot of people get tripped up, is they say, well, I went to this dealership and I asked the guy to run my credit and tell me what my payment would be. I didn't like the payment, so I left and I went to another dealership. And then they did the same thing. And then I left and I went to a third dealership. And by the time they got to the third dealership, they found out their score dropped by 20 points, because each time that was a hard pull. So it's better that you actually take your own and just say, hey, here's my score. It's a 725. Ask your finance department what they would run my payment on. If the payment's not what you like, you can get up from the desk and go to another dealership, no effect on your credit, because you have the score, you have the report, and the payment and what they're quoting you should be within 90% of actually what it would come back at, especially if credit report that you had within the last 30 days. And when you identify the dealership that you do want to go with, they're still going to go through their process of running their own report, making sure it matches up, lines up with what you presented.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Joe,
Yes.
we're doing a millennial premarital meeting for about 6 hours on April the 23rd. And one of the things that we're going to be presenting as for these millennials from high school graduates to 40 years old is what to do to get ready for marriage. The millennials are in horrendous shape. And one of the things that we are going to be pushing at them is what their finances look like and what they should look like. So how do we get in touch with you for materials and even for future speaking engagements? Are you going to show something later on that gives us that information?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Pastor. I'll have that. The very last slide, I will share contact information, and I would be honored to participate and support any way I can. One of the things that I've shared with Pastor Reed and also his wife, his lovely wife, Mrs. Reed, is when that was part of our conversation is, and what attracted me to the marriage ministry is that is one of the books that I'm working on is Marriage and Money, making it last and making sure the money doesn't break the marriage up. So passionate about to share that information, and
Yeah.
as would be excited to participate any way I could.
Right. That's good. Thank you so much. I'm good.
Yeah, yes, sir. So let's talk about here we are at the beginning of the year, and yes, sir, brother.
Okay, can I jump in? One more question. I want to go jump back before we get too far. When you were referring to holding receipts and how you can, I know when in dealing with the insurance company, if you have a loss, like a break-in and things are taken, they prefer to have the original receipt rather than a bank statement saying, or, you know, they want definite, well, exactly what item, exactly what it costs, exactly what date, things like that. Now, what I did was scan my receipts and kept them that way. So I had a copy of them because even with receipts, that ink wears out and everything else. So that's how I resolved that part of holding on to receipts. Because the insurance company, when it comes to payout, they want the exact information. So yeah, they don't look at the whether it be a credit card or, you know, something that's less descriptive.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Definitely, if there are any particular items in your home that are unique, you know, for example, a 50-inch television, you know, that's sort of a standard thing. But one of the things that I've heard also and claims representatives say that's important, especially with items in your home, is to have a video record of those items beforehand, because that way, even if you don't have the paper receipt, you have a video record and can show proof of, especially if there's something that is unique, such as a family heirloom or a particular item that you spent, you know, money for, a good amount of money for, that is not a standard item such as a television. Yeah. So that's a great point of being able to scan it in. That's another way of keeping documentation and keeping it neat as well.
As far as serial numbers, also serial numbers are of particular items, TVs, etc., that give a better description of exactly what item you had. Yeah, amen. Because the last thing you want to do is not get all the what you should get from having the items that were taken from you, just because they say, hey, well, you don't have we don't know exactly what you had. You don't have, you know, accurate documentation. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And just speaking of it, I don't want to get too far off when we talk about insurance claims, but we've had it happen over the last few years here in Michigan. Again, anything that you consider of true value, I would recommend not leaving it in your basement. So, you know, we've had a lot of floods, unfortunately, backup sewer drains, things of that nature here in Michigan. And a lot of people, even though they had all their homeowners insurance paid up, it just did not cover those items. So the recommendation is anything of true value, don't leave it in the basement. Even I know for many, basements can be storage units as well. So you got to be mindful of that. So let's talk about, you know, having or achieving financial freedom, or what we call financial wellness. We all need to understand that it doesn't happen by luck or mistake. We have to have a strategy. And so with a strategy, we need to understand what is the difference between saving, investing, and gambling. And Pastor Wesley touched on something a moment ago, which is extremely important, is that today's millennials, and you listen to some of the investment strategies that are being touted in today's world, this is just Joe's personal opinion. I'm going to put it under the category of gambling. I'm going to share with you all what I believe is a tried and true process of achieving financial wellness and financial freedom. And it starts with the previous screen that we just touched on, is eliminating debt, keeping a good credit score, because that way, the better your score, the less you pay if you have to borrow money. So that helps you save money in the long run. But no different than we all understand as disciples of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ is the chief cornerstone, the Melchizedek of Christianity. When we relate it to finances, the cornerstone to any financial plan is going to be keeping a cash reserve. So we recommend, at least to start, 3 to 6 months of your committed expenses, or 3 to 6 months of your net income just sitting in a savings account, bank account, there for emergency and opportunity. Again, the minimum is 3 to 6 months. The ideal would be to get to 12 months. That way, if for any reason you have unforeseen work stoppage could be the company you worked for went out of business, the government shut down the businesses because the state was on lockdown due to a pandemic. You have economic conditions that affected your company and you aren't working as many hours as you worked, understand that 3 to 6 months expenses gives you the peace of mind to make sure that you can still keep your 725 credit score because you can meet all of your obligated expenses even if you're not working. And at the same time, you don't have to liquidate or sell out of your investment portfolio at an inopportune time when the market is down. So all those things have happened when we don't find ourselves in a position of saving. So saving is always keeping money in an emergency opportunity position, a liquid position, such as cash reserve. Investing is where we're then putting money towards something in the future. And the future is defined as at least 5 or more years, 3 or more years, meaning that as you put it there, you're willing to let it stay and sit there for a period of time to go through the various economic cycles. And we're going to touch on the economic cycles in just a moment. And then when it comes to gambling, again, now it is a shame how many online and betting commercials we see nowadays. That's all you see all the time because they realize that people have a problem of wanting to just get money quick and get it fast. So gambling is where you put in a little bit of money and you hope for a big return in an immediate time frame. And it's unfortunate that I find people put more hope and people put more faith into the odds of 1 in 100 million than they do of taking the chances of, let me just do it systematically and be paid. So we definitely don't want to do that. And when I mentioned by some of the millennials, even gambling nowadays, a lot of the investing that's being done is being done in what are called crypto investments or NFTs, things that are new, things that are not proven, things that are not actually vetted by the government or federally approved. But just because a lot of people were putting money there doesn't necessarily mean that it makes the most sense. So again, I like to say, let's try to avoid gambling and let's stick with the top 2 of saving and investing.
Joe, could you give a little bit of experience? Because we have made mention of what you just said about having at least 12 months reserve, and what we have found is like talking to a wall. And can you give a little bad, how do you say it, bad experiences people have had that have not had those savings put away?
Sure. I mean, well, it is unfortunate when you say bad experiences. That is, many times the reason why people file bankruptcy. At the same time, too, if you look at the advent of what we call the advanced check cashing or payday loan entities, that has come up as well because people find themselves in a position that they got to have money now because they don't have it anywhere else to tap into it. It's a national average. I believe that 25% of people in the workforce have less than $400 sitting in a reserve position. And so what happens in those instances, that's where then we find where the credit card bills mount up because life does happen. The tire goes flat, the hot water tank goes out, the transmission goes out. And if we don't have that emergency fund to pull out, we find ourselves borrowing in order to fulfill that emergency that comes up. And when that happens, that we've borrowed the money to do it, we ultimately end up paying more than it was at that time because of the interest that's on it. And if you ever find yourself in that position, I tell people too, if you have to have a credit card, have a universal credit card, just a basic Visa. The reason I say that because when you use a store specific card, they will charge you more interest than the nominal or regular cards. Because remember, if I'm, say for example, Bell Tire. Bell Tire is not a bank. What Bell Tire did is they opened up a line of credit with a bank. And with that line of credit, Bell Tires charge 10%, but when you come in and open up a Bell Tire card or account, I'm charging you 21% for the 10% that I'm paying them. Bell Tire makes money on their borrowed money when you borrow it. So if you had just actually gone to Visa directly yourself, you could have got the card at 10% and eliminated paying that extra money to Bell Tire if you have to go that route of using a card. But ultimately, we want to help build up, as Pastor Wesley stated, the cash reserve. And that's done by systematically saving. You want to have, just like how right now, majority of us, if we're working, and as we get paid, our paychecks are electronically deposited into a checking account. Go back to your employer, get a certain amount, $25, $50, $100 of pay, have that go to the savings account. So that way, every time you get paid, you're feeding your savings account. No different than I'm sure you gentlemen have heard, I just know Pastor Wesley, being the great preacher that he is, has said, feed your faith and it will grow. Well, feed your savings account, it will grow. We can't expect it to grow if you're not systematically adding to it. So when we talk about investing, well, how do we go about creating an investment portfolio? What I've placed here before you gentlemen is what we call the pyramid of investments. And the pyramid of investments, this is just really just a summary of all of the different types of investments that are out there that are available to you to invest in. We go from the top of the pyramid, where we have speculative investments, and believe it or not, gold, because I know a lot of people, you hear it touted, they say they want to buy gold and silver. Gold and silver is considered a speculative investment. However, gold and silver has attained its value because our dollar is now a fiat currency. So when our dollar is exposed and it can go down, people say, well, I'm going to invest in gold because that's something that holds a universal value. So it's held up better in value, but historically, gold is considered a speculative investment. And it is volatile. It does go up and down, even if you buy it. And then we have growth investments, we have secure investments, and at the very bottom, we have what I call the foundation of investing. And in that foundation is where you're going to find where you invest the cash reserves that we talked about, having that minimum, again, 3 to 6 months. And if you notice there, it's low risk, low return. And the reason why I want to mention that low risk, low return, I know some people, because of their history of investing in other things that are in the growth and secure areas, they've lost money in the market and they just said, I'm done, Brother Joe, investing in the market. I'm putting everything in the bank. That's fine. You can do that. But I just want to make you aware of this. Again, savings accounts, checking accounts right now, because our government has had to make moves to keep the economy flowing, interest rates are at all-time lows. Most bank accounts are paying less than 1% nowadays, even on savings accounts. So as you've accumulated all your money in savings because you're apprehensive about investing, the money's there, it's liquid, it's safe, which is fine, and you're protected by FDIC up to $250,000 per bank account. But I simply implore you, gentlemen, to think about if that money is something that is earmarked long-term, it's there in the bank, it's safe, but it's not keeping up with inflation. Inflation historically, prior to the last few months, has gone up at a clip of about 3%. So if we leave all of our money for long-term things, long-term again is identified as 3, 5 years or more, and it's all sitting in the bank, that's a safe way of losing money because your money is not keeping up with the purchasing power that it needs for the items that are in the future. So the whole idea is when you're creating an investment portfolio is to identify first and foremost, when do you need the money? What is the money being used for? So the monies that I want to keep in the bank account are my emergency fund. And people always ask the question again, just to go back to how do we define what's a good amount to keep in an emergency fund? Have a budget so you can know what is exactly your 3 to 6 months of expenses. You should know how much it takes per month minimum to run your household. Those are all your committed expenses, from your mortgage payment, car note, auto insurance, utility payments, cell phone. These are all the things that you have to pay. I like to define your committed expenses as things that are, if you didn't pay it, either somebody's going to come and retrieve the product or item, or they're going to cut it off. So those are, and these are things that also could affect your credit. So once you identify what that need is, that's your committed expenses. And of course you have things in there such as your medical insurance premiums, groceries, things of that nature. But once we identify that figure, anything that's above that 6 to 12 months, 3 to 6 months, that's when we can start looking at investing money. And when we invest, we again have all of these different options available to us, whether it be mutual funds, whether it be stocks, different things, but your portfolio should be in line with what your objective is. The analogy I like to give people, gentlemen, is think of your investment portfolio as your wardrobe. Okay, what I mean by that is your wardrobe is, if you go to a cookout this summer, you're not going to wear a tuxedo. You only wear a tuxedo to black tie affairs. You would be wearing the wrong outfit for the wrong occasion. In the winter months, all of us wore sweaters, turtlenecks, and long pants. Well, we wouldn't wear those in the middle of summer. It was the wrong season. So your portfolio works the exact same way. So things that are for today, that's cash reserve. Things that are for 3, 5, or 10 years out or in the future, then we start looking at other things. You line up the investment with what the objective, the time frame, and ultimately what you're using it for. So any questions there, gentlemen?
Let me ask you a question on that, Joe, because since I've been retired, I've been, I'm in credit union, but I invest that extra money that I have in either, I put it in a money market. I've been thinking about a CD thing too, also. So is that a good investment? I mean, between the money, the money market is not that much, like 2%, 2.5% on your money, because pretty much everything that I invested for it's come out direct deposit out of my checking account. And I have some money in my savings, but I have some money in the money market. But I've been thinking about investing in other areas. But I'm retired now. I don't have that. I don't have that cash flow like I used to every week. I only got cash flow every once a month. You know what I'm saying?
Understood. Well, yeah, definitely money market accounts are an additional, again, you see they fall right in that same category as a savings, additional foundational investment where you get just a little bit more interest, not a lot more, just a little bit more interest. But ultimately, again, it comes down to the time frame and when you're going to use the money, and also your comfort level and understanding of the investment of you're going to use. If you notice, though, again, because they're in that same category, it's similar to saying, if I drive a Suburban or a Yukon. You know what I'm saying? So they're both SUVs. They're both by GMC or General Motors. They have different names, but they're really about the same. And that's what I would say between a money market account and a savings account. CDs, you get a little bit more interest, but not a lot right at this very moment until rates start to come back up. But there are other, as you notice just above it, there are other secure investments that could also possibly net you a little bit more in returns. But a lot of it also comes down to, again, the time frame and your comfort level.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I had a question, Joe. Do you suggest credit unions rather than the banks? Because the banks have been paying me 0.01%, and I'm just so frustrated. I'd rather see it myself going up higher. Are credit unions safer?
Well, it's not necessarily that credit unions are safer. The primary difference when you look at most banks are national chains. So, for example, and again, I'm not knocking any one bank or promoting a bank. I'm just using their name as this example. Let's say Chase or Bank of America, or Wells Fargo. They're all over the country compared to, say, a Michigan Public Schools Employee Credit Union or Detroit Teachers Credit Union. Credit unions have a smaller pool of what they call members. And you notice that when you go to a bank, you're a customer or a client of the bank. But when you go to a credit union, they consider you a member. So they're servicing a much smaller group, a local group. They're not spread out as far. So they can typically lend money a little bit easier. They can also pay a little bit higher in rates, solely based upon they're dealing with a smaller group, and they know that the group that they're dealing with is right here local in their backyard. So that's why credit unions tend to be a little bit more favorable on a local basis. And again, this comes down to your needs. If you're a person that, for example, let's say you live in Michigan in the summer and you live down in Florida or Texas or anywhere else during the winter months, a credit union may not be suitable because that credit union is here locally based and you're down south. Now, keep in mind, there is a federal credit union network. So if you're with a credit union that's tied to that network, you have the luxury of also still doing things across the country. In today's virtual space, there's pretty much almost anything you could do at your credit union, you can do it online, the same as you would with the bank. So again, but your question was, is a credit union safer? Not really safer, because they're both. Credit unions are under what's called the NCUA, National Credit Union Association, offers some of the same protections of your money as the FDIC offers as well, in terms of your cash being protected up to a certain dollar amount. But for the most part, that's the only primary difference, is that credit unions just offer a little bit more flexibility to their base. I was showing this graph here, gentlemen, for us to understand that we do not want to get emotional when it comes to investing. And the reason why I say we don't want to get emotional is what we've experienced for the last almost 10 years. You know, the last time we had a recession, which I'm going to touch on in just a moment, was in 2008. But since that time, the market has been going up and up and up and up. And I know so many people are excited. They're looking at their statements and they're saying, I'm making money and this is good. And, you know, I invested in Amazon. I bought DocuSign, or they're touting the investments that they purchased, and they feel like, hey, I'm a super smart investor. I picked right things. However, the last few months, especially since the beginning of this year, the market has been going down. I was even talking to a person the other day, and they said, I looked at my 401k statement and I've lost X amount of dollars. I'm not feeling too good about it. What should I do? Should I get out? Again, let's not be emotional. We have to understand, what is the time frame of when you need the money. So if this is money that you don't need today, you don't need this year, what we want to do is hold on, because the market goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. And what I mean by that is, if you look at this graph here, this is a historical graph going back to 1928. And the reason I bring that up is, in 1928, some of us may recall, some of you may recall at the time, your grandparents or your parents talking about it, that was the Great Depression. And what we're looking at, if I go from the far left to the right at the top of the screen, is the red line shows what is defined as a 20% market decline, or what we would officially call a bear market. So a bear market is a term you hear they say in the news, and that means that the stock market is at 20% or below. These gray shaded bars you see here are what we call recessions that take place. They're numbered. And you have on the screen, we have a total of 13 recessions since 1928. And you can even go down the line here. It talks about some of the world events that were taking place during these recessionary periods. Many of you may recall some of them. And it tells us also the year it took place, and it tells us the percentage decline that actually happened. So the very last one that we have on the screen here is at the very bottom. This is actually when the pandemic happened. That was February of 2020. In a period of about 1 to 1.5 months, the market fell 34%. 34%, but it only lasted 1 month. It was not a prolonged recession, but it was, again, a 34% decline. So historically, if we look at what has happened since 1928, on average, our bear markets last for a period of 22 months, and we have declines in the market of about 40%. However, if we go over to the far side, conversely, we have what is called a history of bull markets. Bull markets is what we've actually been through the last few years. That is when the market is up. Okay, and bull markets historically have averaged, you can see here, a 166% return. And they've lasted for a period of 54 months, 5 or more years. So what am I pointing out to you, gentlemen, is that we've had a long bull run market since our true recession, which was in 2008. We're in overtime. So we're due for a recession. But a recession does not mean that you lose money. What we need to understand, when you own equity investments, and that's the key, when you own equity investments, you only lose money when you sell them for less than what you paid for them. If you don't sell them, you don't lose money. Now, on your statement, it'll show a lower value, But now this goes back to holding on and allowing it to come back up over time. So as an example, think about all of us who owned homes in 2007, 2008. That was the last true recession we had, the global meltdown, the financial crisis in America. You owned homes and you got a state equalized value letter in the mail from the state of Michigan that showed your home's value was less than what it was in previous years. Now, if you weren't trying to sell your home, no problem, no issue. I was in that boat. Same home. I've been in this home since for a while. But did I like that the value was less? I didn't. But guess what? I wasn't planning on selling during that time either. So I was okay with it. So I've held on to my investment, my equity, and now my home's value is back up again. The same thing happens with the stock market. You own mutual funds, you own stocks. As long as you own good investments, they will come back over time. Now you may wonder, you say, well, Brother Joe, how do you know it's going to come back over time? What guarantees that? Our economy is based on what is called capitalism. Capitalism is based on what's called consumerism. Consumers are what you, I, and everybody on this planet is, meaning as long as we buy products and services, there will always be publicly traded companies that have to sell us those products and services. There will always be. So think of, for example, companies that we cannot go without. DTE is a good example. DTE is a publicly traded company. They're a utility company. The world is tied to utilities. That's the only way the internet works. That's the only way these cell phones work. That's the only way we actually get water. So think of all the things that are just tied to utilities. Gas prices, yes, they're through the roof, but guess what? Every single product that we receive, whether it be in a store, whether it be in a hospital, anywhere, a restaurant, any product we receive, they all touch a truck one way or another. So gas is going to be there. Transportation services are always going to be there. Think of medical services. Those aren't going anywhere. These are all publicly traded companies. So gentlemen, I just want to remind you, even as we go into, my personal opinion, another recessionary period here in the near term, because we're due for one, we're overdue. That's why I'm showing you this graph. Hold on to your portfolio if you have good quality investments. And if you don't need the money right now, don't sell it just for sake of what your statement shows and out of fear. So take the emotion out of it. Be objective, identify when do you need the money. Now, if you're a person that you potentially might need this money that's in that account this year or next year, then I would say that's a different story. But if you know you're not going to touch that money for another 3-5 years, hold on, allow the market to go through its cycles, and it'll come back up over time. Speaking of inflation, this is just a graph here to show us that inflation is going to continue. And so as in this example, these are just figures so you can get the concept. If you had an average monthly bill for groceries of $670 in the year 2020, by the year 2030 rolls around, that same amount of groceries is going to cost you $945 per month. By the year 2040, it's going to cost you $1,333 per month. So this goes back to a few moments ago, I said why you don't want to leave all your money in cash. Because if it's in cash and it's money you know you're not going to use till the year 2030, it's not going to keep up with these rising costs. It's no different than, the bag of chips you buy. You pop that bag of chips open nowadays, it's mostly air. Same with the box of cereal. It's mostly air. Eggs costing more. It's all ultimately going to cost more. And this is based on a 3.5% inflation rate, which over the last 4 or 5 months, inflation has gone up at about 6.5 to 7%. So again, it's important that wherever you have your money, understand what it's doing, how it's working, is it outpacing inflation, and ultimately, when are you going to need it? And when you understand what your money is doing, you can then identify how long it'll be before your money actually doubles. This is what's called the rule of 72. It's just a mathematical formula, and it's proven. Basically, you take whatever interest rate your investment is earning, and you divide it into the number of 72. That tells you how many years it will take for your investment to double if you added nothing else to it. So if your investment's earning 10%, excuse me, 7.2%, it takes 10 years for your investment to double. The higher you go up in interest, the less amount of time it takes for your investment to double. The lower you go in interest, the longer it's going to take for your investment to double. So think of it this way. For all of us, I know at one point in time, either our mothers or our grandmothers used to buy us double E government bonds. Everybody remember that? You know, you buy the $50 bond, it cost them $25. The government would give the stated rate of interest, and you knew that it used to be 10 to 12 years that bond would double. Well, because rates are so low right now, I mean, bonds are taking almost 30, 33 years to double. So again, because the rates are just so low. So again, this just kind of gives you an idea to project out, understand what your portfolio is doing. But when it comes to investing, this is what I believe is, I'm going to say the most important thing is to pay yourself first when it comes to saving and investing. That's why for most people, their 401k retirement savings plan will be their largest investment asset. And the reason behind that is it comes out of your check before anything else, before taxes and before you get it, and it goes in that account. It's out of sight, it's out of mind. You can do, I gave the example earlier in terms of building up cash reserves. You can do the exact same thing with an investment outside of your 401k. Have it set up automatically. And this would definitely apply, Pastor Wesley, to our millennials, is that it does not take a lot of money to build money. What I mean by that, this is an example of saving $25 a week. $25 a week, earning only 4%. Now, if we go higher up in interest, it increases all those values just in the interest. So this is now we're talking about having the money work for you. If that person incrementally increased the amount over time, this starts at $25 a week. Imagine after 2 years, they go up to $35 a week. After a few more years of that, they go up to $55 a week. The whole idea here is you could see, again, $25 could get you $55,000. If the person wanted to do $125, get you up to $276,000. And that's, again, only at a 4% return. So for longer term things, if we can get a higher interest rate, which is proven historically, if you look back, and I know I showed a moment ago the graph 1928, but the average annual return of a stock market portfolio or portfolio tied to the stock market is about 11%. So if we take this up to 11%, that person would be close to $1 million in that same amount there. So again, a little bit goes a long way. And I believe it's in Zephaniah, for the Lord likes to see it begin. Do not despise small beginnings, for the Lord loves to see the work begin. So that's what I always tell people, is that you got to start somewhere. So many people feel intimidated when it comes to investing. It doesn't take a lot. It does not take a lot. Pay yourself first. One of the things that's really prevalent in today's world, especially when things start to get crazy in the world, which they already are all the time. But I mean by crazy though, when we have these wars going on and the stock market starts going crazy, people start coming up with investment schemes. So I want to highlight this to you all. And a matter of fact, it was a person, I was talking to a client, he told me he was a gentleman that had got discharged from the armed services because he was disabled. He had a disability claim that lasted almost 22 years before he got paid. He ultimately got paid. The federal government paid him out over $330,000. And 2 days after that $330,000 was electronically deposited into his bank account, he got a phone call from someone saying that they were trying to create fraud on his account and that he needed to give his account number and social security number over the phone. And so he literally almost believed the call and drove to his credit union to find out. And they had to tell him, like, nobody called you for that. Gentlemen, we have to be very, 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 very aware of the schemes and the tricks that take place in today's world. You'll get emails, you'll get phone calls. Bottom line is, if something just doesn't feel right, don't do it. Do not do it. Always check the source. Even if somebody called you, ask for the number so you can call them back. Verify their location. Don't give out any information or numbers over the phone unless you have vetted the group that you're working with. And then ultimately too, it never hurts to always seek wise counsel. What I mean by seek wise counsel, talk with a professional. talk with another professional. Does not have to be me, but there are many, many, many licensed professionals, tax professionals, financial advisors, insurance agents. Find one that you know that has worked with someone and who you trust their recommendation as well. So that way you can make sure that you're doing your due diligence. And I hope Elder Reed doesn't mind me telling him this story, but I was referred to him by another brother in Christ. And he and I met, and we talked, we had a good time talking the first time. And he says, all right, well, I want you to talk to my wife also. So then 3 of us talked, and we talked, and I shared with them my recommendation based upon the things that they were looking for. And she said, okay, that sounds good, Brother Joe, but I'm going to now go talk to the people at my credit union. And she took the information I gave her, and she went and talked to somebody else before they ultimately came back and said, okay, we're ready to move forward. So they did their due diligence just to make sure. And I only recommend the same for you all as well, to avoid investment fraud in today's world.
Now, Joe, as you say that, a number of years back, we had a dear person at the church who, now, I worked at the post office. I was rather high up in the post office, and I worked very intimately with the Postal Inspection Service. And they had a motto that said this: if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Okay? And the bottom line, this dear lady, with all her heart, had been contacted by somebody from Nigeria that she had gotten an inheritance of X amount of dollars, and all she had to do was give X amount of dollars to come and get it. It took us about a week of counseling her, praying, binding, loosing, the whole bit, before she finally decided not to do it, because she was going to do it. And it was a fraud. It just said so. It was a fraud.
Wow. Wow. As I said, the schemes that are out here in today's world are very, very wicked. And you just got to be mindful. You got to be mindful, diligent, and alert at all times. All righty. So lastly, just want to transition into one other area of financial checkups, gentlemen, and that is always go back and revisit and take a look at your areas of coverage. And as I'm looking at the screen, I just realized there's one area that I did not have on here that I'm going to call credit protection and credit monitoring. But you always want to make sure and go back and look at your health policies, your dental, your vision, see if there's any changes. Typically, I know that happens in October when the renewal periods come around. If you have long-term care coverage, I recommend at least every 2 to 3 years shopping and checking on your auto and your home insurance, because that way policies do change. And speaking of auto, everybody should be receiving their refund checks from your insurance carriers due to the state of Michigan. And then we also have your life insurance and disability insurance. So just to go through those real briefly, I believe of all the insurances, especially for those of us who are still working, disability insurance is going to be your #1 insurance. The reason I say that is that I call that paycheck protection. And what I mean by paycheck protection is that your ability to work is what provides and supplies for everything else. But what we end up doing is we end up insuring our car, insuring our cell phones, insuring our televisions and all these other things, the things that we work hard to get. But then if we can't work and if we don't have disability coverage, those things mean nothing. And again, going back to, you may end up liquidating your cash reserve. So for those who are on the line with us this morning that are still working, I implore you to really, really make sure that you have disability coverage. And when you look at your disability coverage, you want to make sure you have short-term and long-term disability coverage. And typically you can expect coverage up to about 66% of whatever your base pay is. And disabilities are real. As you can see here on the screen, this is according to the Social Security Administration. Roughly 1 in 4 people will become disabled before they retire. Doesn't necessarily mean a permanent disability, but you will spend a period of time unable to work. Now, all of the other coverages that we touched on, whether it be home insurance, auto insurance, health insurance, disability insurance, credit monitoring protection insurance, all those things are what I like to call if and when scenarios. Many of us have probably driven for over 20 years and have never gotten in an accident, praise God. Many of us have lived in our home for 20 plus years and have never filed a homeowner's insurance claim, praise God. And we're not hoping those things happen, but we pay the premiums so that if something were to happen, our insurance policies kick in. Well, there is one insurance that all of us will ultimately have a claim paid out on, and that is life insurance. There's no if you pass away, it's only when you pass away. So I definitely always recommend revisiting, how much life insurance is enough, and it really depends upon the stage in life that you're at. It also depends upon what your objectives are. One of the things that I have seen clients take advantage of over the years is many times some families, instead of the individual paying an insurance premium, the family will pay a premium to make sure there's a certain amount of coverage to pass on. In effect, it actually, call it like it is, insurance is an investment. And let's go back to that generational wealth. You can tell your children, your grandchildren all day to save $100. They could save $100, which is good, but maybe if they directed that $100 toward a premium on a policy that covered mom or dad, ultimately what that does is it positions for the family to receive a tax-free benefit in the future. That's what insurance is. Insurance is a tax-free benefit. So if you have a desire to leave a legacy, or if you have a desire to leave it for a charitable organization, that's one of the things that we've talked to members of our church about over the years. Not everybody, some have decided to leave 10% of whatever their benefit is to the church. They're tithing on that final benefit that they have coming in. So again, it comes down to, again, what your goals, what your objectives are, but revisiting how much coverage is enough and do you have the right type of coverage. And that's, again, with all of your policies. So I recommend, we're talking about spring cleaning, going back and revisiting those things. And then last but not least is when we talk about that final stage in life that we all will get to at a certain point, you want to make sure you have a proper estate plan. And with a proper estate plan, not only will it include a last will and testament, but it should have, and I recommend to have, a durable power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. Again, I like to say an estate plan, a good estate plan, is there so your family does not have to cry twice. So we've seen it happen where individuals have done a great job of saving, they've done a great job of investing, done a great job of managing debt and eliminating debt. They have the house paid for, but they become incapacitated and they're unable to make their own decisions. And then the family falls out with a disagreement of what type of care should happen. Or they fall out as to, the doctor says there's nothing else they could do, but somebody says, leave them on. All those things can be avoided if you have healthcare power of attorney and you have a durable power of attorney. And then I also recommend on all of your policies and investment accounts, going back and revisiting your beneficiary designations. Many times we will have somebody listed on there that may have predeceased us. And we have not actually thought about it, but they're still listed on there. And then what happens when you go, then it's left to who? It's now then an estate issue. So at least once a year, every other year, go in and just revisit, make sure that your beneficiary designations are the way you would ultimately intend or want them to be if you were still living. So with that being said, I will pause or stop right there to answer any questions or any comments on the information that we covered, gentlemen. All right, and I know Pastor Wesley, you had asked about me sharing contact information. This is my contact information here on the screen. Gentlemen, again, as I stated earlier, for me, I'm very passionate about wanting to help people. I believe that God's blessings are meant to flow through and not to flow to. So, if God has blessed me with the ability to work in a field that can help others, I believe I'm supposed to share this information, which is why I'm here today and to help others. So if there's something that you might want to talk with me about individually, I definitely welcome the opportunity to have a phone call with you. I don't charge for phone calls. To have a consultation with you, I don't charge for consultations. That consultation could be in person or virtually, just as we're meeting today, just to answer questions. Does not commit you to having to work with me or anything, but I'm here to serve you. And in doing so, this is my contact information if you have to reach out and have any questions, comments, or concerns. And then last but not least, I will say I'm gonna put in a shameless plug. And that shameless plug is that I have been blessed to help compile this information in a booklet that I wrote almost 2 years ago now. And the book is called Kingdom Stewardship Principles. Just wanted to share that just to let you know that it is available. And it's a book that actually I've used with a couple of different other churches in the format of a Bible study. And what's different in that presentation compared to what we went to today, we actually lift up specific areas in the Bible and how the Bible speaks to these areas in our finances. That book is available at Amazon and lulu.com. And if you find that you wanted to purchase a copy, I'm just going to say in advance, God bless you and thank you for your support. And I hope that you would find that that book would be beneficial, edifying, and encouraging to you. But I want to say thank you so much, Sons of Thunder and Elder Reed, for allowing me to come out and share with you all this morning. I hope you found that the information was beneficial and informative.
Joe, if I can speak for a minute, can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know my.
Loud and clear.
Very good. Joe, you provided a parabola of information today, and I want to thank you for coming on. And I'm thankful for Brother Reed for presenting you. And he recorded it because I'm not going to be able to digest all of this now, but if I can look it over, it would be a great help. I guess the main thing for me would be the estate sale. There's a lot of good information that you have there I have to look over, but I need to get a estate sale. So I'll probably be contacting you to find out maybe some things that I need to understand more to make sure I include everything in it. But it's not good to let the probate take care of you or your situation after you're gone, but to have an estate sale that would take care of that. So that would be my main concern. If you could talk a little bit more about that estate sale, what we need to make sure we have, or to even have it ourselves.
Yeah, great question, and thank you so much for your kind words. So what happens, gentlemen, we all need to understand that all of us have an estate. A estate is simply defined as things that you own. And so over time, we accumulate things. Some